Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I have swatches for you from the OPI Grease collection for the 40th anniversary of the film Grease. A lot of you guys make fun of me because I haven't seen a bunch of older classic movies, but I've seen this one multiple times in my life and I thoroughly love it. I will say I haven't seen the second one though, but I always heard it wasn't as good, so. Anyway, I have their standard 12 polishes to share with you, and then I also have their 3 leather-like polishes that they came out with in this collection, so I do have 15 polishes to share with you today. I got these off transdesign.com. In the description box below, I will link the Transdesign site, I will link the OPI site, the OPI's Instagram page, and my Instagram page where I will have more swatches of everything in this collection. So there's no way I can hold up 15 polishes, but let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the leather-like finish polishes, and up first we have Rydell Forever, and this is just a white polish that dries to like a slightly textured and matte finish. And then just for like color comparison, here it is next to Alpine Snow. It is a little bit more of a brighter white, but my bottle of Alpine Snow is a little older. Here's our first coat of Rydell Forever. This has a great formula. It's a little bit on the thicker side, but it's not thick where it's difficult to work with. It just kind of stays right where you put it. It also applies pretty evenly here on this first coat. It is just a little bit sheer, so I am going to go in for a second coat. These do dry down to a matte finish, and it does dry textured, which it is supposed to, but if you don't like that, you will want a nice thick glossy top coat, possibly 2 coats of top coat. So here's the second coat, and this does cover completely in 2 coats for me. I also noticed the more that you build this up, like if you went in for 3 coats, I feel like it doesn't dry as satiny and it doesn't dry as textured. So bear that in mind. You might want to use this over a white if that's something that you're actually going for, but this isn't difficult to remove either. So there is 2 coats. Next is Electrifyin Pink, and this is a bright bubblegum pink that dries to that same matte and slightly textured finish. And the closest thing from OPI I have to it is Malibu Peer Pressure, which obviously does not dry the same, and it does have a kiss more peach in it. Here's our first coat of Electrifyin Pink. And this has the same kind of formula as Rydell Forever, same things, a little bit on the thicker side, but it's really, really easy to work with, no running or pulling or staining. Again, this one is going to dry down to a satiny matte finish, and it is going to dry slightly textured, but it's not difficult to remove. So here's the second coat, and this does cover completely in 2 coats, and just like with the previous polish, I feel like the more you build this up, the more texture and matte you're going to lose, which I don't know if that's just me, but I feel like if I needed a 3rd coat, I would almost lose it completely. So there is 2 coats. The last leather-like finish one I have is called Grease is the Word, and this is the black that dries to the matte, slightly textured finish. I don't have OPI's Onyx anymore, so I don't have that to show you, but it is just a black. Here's our first coat of Grease is the Word, and this is the last leather-like polish, so it does again have that same easy to work with formula, nice and smooth. Just a little bit sheer here on this first coat, so I am going to go ahead and do a second coat, but very, very nice to work with. Again, you're going to get that leathery satin matte finish with the texture, but again, if you build it up too thick, maybe it's just me, maybe, I don't know, tell me if it's just me, but I feel like I lose a lot of the texture and a lot of the matte, like it dries a little bit glossier on the second coat, which you'll, I'm sure, see in those swatch photos. But again, this is just absolutely beautiful, completely opaque in 2 coats, and no staining or anything crazy like that here either, so there is 2 coats. Up next we have Tell Me About It Stud, and this is a bright fire engine red cream that OPI really, really likes to do. And here it is next to Adam Said It's New Year's Eve, just from a recent release of theirs. Here's our first coat of Tell Me About It Stud, and this is pretty standard to the OPI line. It's got a magnificent formula, easy to use, no running or pooling or anything like that. Almost completely opaque here in 1 coat. OPI does like these like jelly-ish creams. So they kind of have this formula perfected. I would hope so by now. So this is a beautiful red if you don't have one in your collection already. So here's the second coat, and this does cover completely in 2 coats for me. You might be able to get away with just 1 coat if you didn't want to go ahead and do that second coat, but I do feel like the second coat really helps. This one also dries decently glossy on its own, though if you want it to last at all, you will want a nice glossy top coat. And forewarning, getting this out of your cuticles is a pain in the butt, so there is 2 coats. Up next we have Summer Lovin', Having a Blast, and this is a bright, kind of like nacho cheese, orange cream. And then here it is next to Santa Monica Beach Peach, which it's a little bit more neon than this. My camera it needs some help. I'm sorry about the flickering, but they're close. They're not the same. Here's our first coat of Summer Lovin', Having a Blast. This covers really, really well here on this first coat for such a nice bright orange polish. It has a great formula, no running or pulling or staining or anything like that. And this one also dries very, very glossy on its own, but if you want it, again, to stay, you will want a nice top coat. So here's 2 coats, and this covers completely in 2 coats for me, and you don't have to work in thicker coats for it to cover either, but depending on your application and your preference, you may opt to go in for a 3rd coat, but I really don't think it's necessary. This is just absolutely beautiful. And I don't have a whole lot else to say about it, but my 5-year-old's screaming in the background, so I'm trying to talk over him, and there's 2 coats. Up next we have Meet a Boy, Cute as Can Be, and this is a super light pastel yellow. It's very, very, very light, and I don't have any OPIs that are close to this one. Here's our first coat of Meet a Boy, Cute as Can Be. This also covers really well here on this first coat. I expected it to be much, much worse because it is first off super light and second off a yellow, but it's also got a fantastic formula, no running or pulling, anything crazy like that. Here's our second coat, and this is a little bit patchy here still in the second coat, which is kind of to be expected. OPI is not like notorious for these light pastels yellows, so I don't quite expect them to have the perfect formula on this, but it is a really, really good one. Either way, I am going to go ahead and go in for a 3rd coat just to even everything out. So here is our 3rd coat. I am going in for a little bit of a thicker 3rd coat just to make sure it does cover completely. This one also dries very fast and very glossy on its own. But once again, top coat, it's necessary. And I don't have anything else to say about this guy. So there's 3 coats. Up next we have Was It All Just a Dream, and this is a light, almost Tiffany blue cream shade, and the closest I have to this shade is Susie Without a Paddle, and you can see that there is more of a green in this one, and this one is more of like a dusty blue. Here's our first coat of Was It All Just a Dream. This one also covers pretty well here on this first coat. It is a little bit streaky, so I am going to go ahead and go in for a 2nd coat. But it does have a fantastic formula. Again, no running or pulling. I do tend to work in thinner coats when it comes to OPI though, because I have had running and pulling in the past. So I do tend to work in thinner coats. If you work in thicker coats, you might have an issue, but I really don't see it happening. So this one does cover completely in 2 coats, which again surprised the heck out of me. It is absolutely beautiful here on 2 coats. It also dries down to a glossy finish on its own without needing that top coat, but if you want it to last, once again, nice glossy top coat. So there's 2 coats. Up next we have Teal Me More, and this is a deeper teal cream shade. And the closest thing I have to this in my collection is that a spear in your pocket. They are very similar, but the spear in your pocket has a touch more blue, and Teal Me More has a touch more green. Here's our first coat of Teal Me More, This covers really well here on this first coat and really evenly. I can still see through to my nail line just a little bit, so I am going to go in for a 2nd coat. But this also has a fantastic formula. I mean, this one is on point with the formula. I also wanted to note that with this shade, it could potentially stain you. I had a little bit of bluing on my nail beds when I removed this, but I don't use base coat when I swatch, so if you use base coat, I'm sure it's going to be just fine. I did leave it on for a couple of hours, so that could potentially have been why. This does cover completely in 2 coats, so it was very close to 1. So there is 2 coats. Up next we have Chills Are Multiplyin', and this is a deep royal blue jelly with a strong blue shimmer, and then the closest thing to this I have is St. Mark's The Spot, which is obviously brighter. This one is more of a blurple royal blue, and then this one is more of just like a bright primary blue. Here's our first coat of Chills Are Multiplyin'. This formula is noticeably thinner than the rest of the formulas in this collection, but it is still decently easy to work with. You just have to work in thinner coats, and those thinner coats are also going to build up to be more oceanic looking anyway, so you will want to build this one up regardless of how thick or thin the formula was. So here's the second coat, and I did go ahead and stop here at 2 coats, though it very well could have gone for a 3rd coat. I did do 3 for my swatch photos. It added a little bit more depth and a little bit more color. This one dries down to a satiny finish, so if you don't like that finish, you will want a nice glossy top coat, and this is another one that I recommend base coat for. I didn't wear it, and I didn't have any staining, but it does have the potential to stain. So there is 2 coats. Up next we have Frenchie Likes to Kiss, and this is a super light pink with a subtle purpley shimmer. And then the closest things I have to that, I don't have anything like exactly like this, but I do have Let Me Buy You a Drink that I wanted to show it because of the shimmers. Obviously they're not the same color, but they do have the same kind of formula. And then I also wanted to go ahead and show it next to the color that keeps on giving from the holiday collection. They are pretty similar, but obviously Frenchie Likes to Kiss has a lot more white in it. Here's our first coat of Frenchie Likes to Kiss. And as to be expected, this one is pretty patchy here on this first coat, but it does have a great formula, no running, pooling, anything crazy like that. I will say that the shimmer in this doesn't stand out nearly as well as I had hoped it did. So here's the second coat, and it is still just a little bit patchy here on the second coat, so I am going to go ahead and go in for a 3rd coat, but depending on your application, 2 might be just fine with you. I was very close to being able to get this completely opaque in 2 coats. I really just wish that shimmer had stood out as nicely on the nail as it does in the bottle. So here's our 3rd coat, and this covers completely in 3 coats for me. This one dries pretty glossy on its own, but if you want to go in for a top coat, I would be all about that life. And this one's not difficult to remove, and it doesn't dry textured or anything like that either. So there is 3 coats. Up next we have Pink Lady's Rule of School, and this is a dusty pink cream, and then I wanted to go ahead and show it next to Excuse Me Big Sur. It does have a little bit more peach in it, Excuse Me Big Sur does, while Pink Lady's Rule of School is obviously a little bit more pink. Here's our first coat of Pink Lady's Rule of School. And this has an absolutely beautiful formula, easy to use, easy to work with, no running, pooling, staining, anything crazy like that. This also covers really well here on this first coat, which surprises me because it is such a light color, and again, OPI does put out a lot of these kind of shades, but I feel like each time they do, the formula gets a little bit better. So this does cover completely in 2 coats for me, though I am going in for a slightly thicker second coat to make sure that it does. This one also does dry nice and glossy on its own, though I would recommend a glossy top coat again, just to keep your manicure on as long as possible. Even if I'm changing my manicure like the next day, I'm going to wear a top coat. Just protects your nails a little bit more. So there is 2 coats. Up next we have You're the Shade That I Want, and this is a bright magenta cream. I don't have anything exactly like this from OPI, but I do have 2 that it's kind of smushed right in between, and the first one being Mad for Madness Sake. Obviously, the one from this collection is a little bit more purple than that, and then the other one is This Is Not Wine Country. So it's kind of squeezed right there in the middle of those 2 shades. Here's our first coat of You're the Shade That I Want. This has another perfect formula. Like, this one is absolutely spot on, easy to use, again, no running or pooling or staining. And this one is completely opaque in one coat for the most part. Like, if you wore one coat and went out the door, I'm sure not a single person would notice that you could see maybe just a hair of a visible nail line. So I am going to go ahead and show you 2 coats, and it does cover 100% in 2 coats. Again, this one dries down to a nice glossy finish, but, you know, make your own decision on that top coat. There's 15 polishes here, so I feel like I don't need to say it 15 times. So there is 2 coats. Up next we have Don't Cry Over Spilled Milkshakes, and this is an almost white, but it's got like a touch of gray blue in there. Unfortunately, I'm the only person in existence who doesn't own my boyfriend Scale's walls, so I don't have a comparison of that, but I did want to go ahead and show it to you again next to Alpine Snow just to show you that it is not white. It does have a touch of something special in there. Here is our first coat of Don't Cry Over Spilled Milkshakes. This one does have a nice formula as well. It is a little bit patchy and streaky here on this first coat. But again, there's no running or pooling or anything like that with this one either. I am working in decently thin coats here, so I am going to build it up in 3 coats today. Depending on how thick of coats you do, 2 coats might be completely fine with you. Here's our second coat, and this one is like right on the edge of being completely opaque in 2 coats. Again, if I'd gone in a little bit thicker on that first coat, this one would probably be just fine on 2 coats. And obviously, since it's such a light color, I didn't have any kind of staining here. But I feel like people like to hear me say that, so I'm going to go ahead and let you know I didn't have any staining. So here's our third coat, and again, for me this does cover completely in 3 coats. This one will also dry down nice and glossy. I really don't have anything else to say about this one. It is absolutely beautiful. And if you don't want that like blaringly white manicure, this is a really, really good alternative. So there's 3 coats. Up next we have Hopelessly Devoted to OPI, and this is a peachy pinky cream. It is more on the peachy side than pinky. But if it were leaning towards like a beige peach or a pinky peach, I would say it's more towards the pinky peach side. And I do have to show you, I'll have a Gin and Tectonic. It's a little bit darker, a Gin and Tectonic is, but they are pretty well in the same family. So here's our first coat of Hopelessly Devoted to OPI. Again, this one has a fantastic formula, no running or pooling. It also covers really well here on this first coat to be such a light color. It is just a little bit patchy here though, so I am going to go ahead and go in for a second coat. But this one is like one of those universally flattering neutral shades. So here's our second coat, and this does cover for me completely in 2 coats, but depending on your application and your preference, you may opt to go in for a third coat. I believe I needed 3 coats for my swatch photo for this one, so it's right in between 2 and 3. And once again, this one does dry down pretty glossy on its own. So there is 2 coats. And lastly for today we have Danny and Sandy Forever, and this is a dark coal gray with like a blue flash to it. It's almost leaning towards a metallic polish, I believe. And I do have Coalmates to show it to you today against each other, and I believe the only difference in these 2 shades is that Coalmates also has like a scattering of holographic throughout it, but otherwise they are pretty identical. And here's our first coat of Danny and Sandy Forever. This one is a little bit sheer here on this first coat. It does have to be built up to kind of get that 3-dimensional look with all the glitters on your nail. As far as the formula goes, this one is also on the thinner side, so you will want to work in nice thin coats so it doesn't pull around the edges of your nails or run into your cuticles or anything like that. So here's our second coat, and this builds up nicely in 2 coats, where if you're not super picky, you could probably wear this in 2 coats, but I am going to go ahead and go in for a third coat because I am working super thinly here, and I do want to get as much dimension out of this as possible. This one also dries down to a satiny finish, so if you don't like that, you will want a nice glossy top coat. So here is our third coat, and this one does cover completely in 3 coats. If you think about it beforehand, I highly recommend a peel-off base coat because this one will be slightly difficult to remove, not as far as needing pure acetone goes, but it will kind of make a mess with all of those little micro glitters and shimmers running around. So there's 3 coats. I'm pretty predictable when it comes to picking my favorites. I do have 3 standouts in this collection. The first one is called Was It All Just a Dream? I am really drawn to this like Tiffany shade. This is almost Tiffany. If it was like a drop greener, it would be Tiffany. But anywhere in between like a baby blue and a Tiffany green calls to me, like those turquoise shades. So I really, really thoroughly enjoy this one. I also really liked Pink Lady's Rule of School for such a nice light pink. It has an almost one coat formula and you really can't beat that. This is 100% my year-round shade, so this is one that I obviously lean towards. And then the third standout in my collection actually kind of surprised me. It's called Don't Cry Over Spilled Milkshakes. This is one of those almost white shades. I am the only nail polish collector in the world that doesn't have my Boyfriend Scales Walls from OPI, but I feel like this is pretty much the same concept, but instead of like a kiss of gray, this one has like a kiss of a blue-gray. So I assume they're decently similar. One day we'll have my Boyfriend Scales Walls, but in the meantime, this is a really good replacement for me. And guys, that is it. Let me know in the comments below what y'all thought of this collection. Let me know if you plan on picking any of them up, and let me know what your favorite was. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you'd like to see more from me, and I will talk to you again next time.